What's going on, everybody? I'm back with another video. This video is going to be looking at how De Zerbi dominates the Premier League in possession of the ball with Brighton. Now, before we get into the video and the tactics behind De Zerbi's way of playing in possession, be sure to subscribe to the channel to get updates on this new app. Should be coming out within the next month or so, so be sure to subscribe to get updates and follow me on Instagram and message me if you want to know more about it. Be sure to go in the description and check out both my books. They're in there. I'm releasing a third book soon, just going through the editing process now. So be sure to look in the description for both my books and my tactics course as well. Now let's get right into the video. So De Zerbi, he starts in a 4-2-3-1 shape, and they'll go through many different systems within their possession structure. So what we have here is we have our 9 coming from the 9 position and into the half space between the lines to match the number 10. We then have 2 out-and-out holding midfielders with a narrow back 4 and wide wingers. Now this is just the starting shape. So a few key movements from De Zerbi's team. If they can't create superiority, if the team is doing a good job stepping and balancing and covering the half space on both sides, maybe trapping the ball, they'll go through some rotations around their wide triangles, which will influence their midfielders. They can also disrupt the opposing team's midfield and the way the opposing team deals with the space between the lines. If the opposing team is very good with their center back staggering, releasing the midfielders, and now allowing to go to a more man-oriented approach to the players between the lines. So we have our back 4 staggering with our 2 center backs, and then we have our midfield shape staggered as well, allowing players to push on while keeping the outlets through the middle closed off through man orientation and the use of cover shout. Now these players are very crucial for the way Brighton play and how they try and break down teams. So for instance, if we come up with a situation like this, where we have a deeper holding midfielder, one of the center backs is stepping, and Brighton seems stagnant in possession, they'll look to circulate the ball, and they might start a wide rotation with the fullbacks going out wide, so the center back can release, go into the half space, and they could change the angle of the ball. So now putting the center back in a wider area, he's directly connected to the half space, which, because of the wide positioning from the fullback, the wide midfielder from the other team will have to make a choice. So this will then disrupt the shifting from the other team and directly influence specific players. So because of the cue from the wide center back, the winger will now make a run either in behind or into the half space, play as a narrow winger, and still going with our 2 holding midfielders. Now these 2 holding midfielders, depending on which player jumps, they can stagger, especially if one of the forward players cheats further forward, then they can definitely stagger, overload the half space, and look to create a switch to the other side diagonally. Now we see our back 4 across here is still connected, our midfielders are staggered, and we still have players influencing the half space. We have our number 9 on the weak side influencing the center backs, but when the ball's on the ball side, on the right hand side here, we'll see the back 4 most likely shift, leaving the wide winger free. But if the game gets very tight and the team becomes very spatially oriented, we shift across so Brighton can't break the team down through the center. They're a bit more reserved in a 4-2-3-1. We'll look to switch again, and now with both center backs in the half spaces, 2 holding midfielders, and 1 winger narrow, the other can follow suit with the fullbacks wide. So now the next adaptation to this system is wingers that are narrow directly on the fullbacks with a narrow midfield. Now we look to narrow the opposing team's back 4 and pin these players into narrow positions. So when the ball is skipped out wide, the midfield has to cover a very long distance horizontally across the field, and to trap possession 2, they'll have to stretch these connections between midfielders while worrying about the half spaces. And as we know, the 2 holding midfielders against 1 number 10 will be very dangerous and easily manipulated. could take a player fanning out wide, moving a man-oriented player, now making a run into the half space, and finding it diagonally. But there'll be many different ways to get these players on the ball facing forward when they are just matched with one attacking midfielder between the two of them. So when the team shifts across, we'll put our players back in the half space, and now the weak side half space is free with the wide fullbacks. Now what Brighton do really well is come underneath. Even if they're trapped, they'll have a pass to the opposite center back diagonally, and if players cheat, this will then further create space for the 2 versus 1 against our number 10 to then be exploited against this 4-2-3-1. And they can even go narrow and create a diamond on the ball side around the half space and interchange with the winger to create more space. So not only do they have different ways they can set up their team and their overall shape, but they can have different ways of creating superiority around the ball via a diamond shape. So we have a diamond shape here with the winger coming deeper and narrow. Then he can run in behind via the half space, and our number 10 can come across to try and create 4v2s and 4v3s. And if the team gets overloaded, we have skip passes, or we shrink the distances between players to overemphasize the overload and look for skip passes, trying to find our opposite holding midfielder to then access the half space. And now we have a 2-2 base, wide fullbacks, 2 attacking midfielders, and narrow wingers. So now the last variation will then start to play with the double pivot and see which variations and which problems we can cause from them. So one cue for this is the number 9 going back between center backs, and he can even play a little bit deeper between the lines, between the 2 holding midfielders and the 2 center backs. This could cue the wingers to then move wider to try and stretch the fullbacks into these wide areas to open up the half spaces. From here, we can have an 8 jump between the lines to match our opposite number 10. So we could have 3 players now between the lines, and now the fullbacks, because the wingers are wide, they'll come narrow, and we'll have a 2-3 build-up shape. So when the players are attracted, the cue now will be get the 2 center backs on the ball free. So when the striker comes, we could get a free center back on the ball to advance the ball, and now try and attract someone from midfield to then find a vertical or a diagonal pass to set up a 3rd man. So how this will look is if the center back is able to become free, we have a player underneath, we'll get everybody facing the right way, and now he'll attract a player. So we want to create advantages through the center. So let's say we target the number 10, he releases, and now we have 3 players, and oftentimes the holding midfielder will go block the half space so it's not a vertical pass through the half space, and we'll shift across. And keeping reference to the opposite 10, he can come closer to really influence his player's position. And now what we saw recently from Ferguson and what he did so well was come between holding midfielders, invite a more vertical pass to then get the holding midfielder on the ball past the first line of pressure, and from here they can have a central overload of a 4 versus 2 against the holding midfielder, finding half spaces in wider positions, or if the defense is very narrow and the fullbacks are very oriented towards the 10, we have passes into wide positions to set up 2 versus 1s against the opposing team's fullback. So these are some of the ways De Zerbi has set up his team to then create a dominant possession structure in the Premier League. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the video, and I'll see you in the next one.